Hey there everybody, welcome back to my channel. I know this channel isn't very popular, but I'm aiming to grow it to 1,000 subscribers this year. That's why I'm posting every few days. I know it's been slightly longer since I uploaded a video. Sorry, I just haven't had the motivation to make videos this week, so I'm doing it now. I hope you understand that. If you want to see my other projects, I'll link them in the description down below. So yeah, let's get on with today's video. Today we're talking about NG feeding. Now, I was briefly in hospital at my lowest weight. I never went to an EDU, but I was in general hospital and I did have an NG feed. I'm not going to insert photos because that would be triggering against YouTube's terms of service and against community guidelines, and this video will be struck down. Shouldn't be, but it would be. I was on NG feeds for about 6 weeks. My goal was to get to a BMI, not a healthy BMI, but a manageable BMI, because I was at a very low BMI and there was talks of me going to an EDU, but that never happened. I just went back under the eating disorder team in the community. I wasn't an adult when this happened, so it may be different if you're a child and this happens. But when you're an adult, they try and keep you out of hospital because EDU spaces are very limited, and for those who are at death's door. I was very underweight, but I was not at death's door. I hit a certain BMI. I tried to cheat my weight, but they made me take off all my clothes and I was in my bra and underwear. And I had to step on the scales and they saw my BMI and they called an ambulance. And I was taken to A&E. A&E admitted me. And I was in general hospital for 6 weeks. While I was in A&E, they were like, we're placing an NG tube. And I was like, no, you're not. So they had sedated me and they placed an NG tube with the little latch thing so you can't pull it out. I was not happy. Okay, that was the last thing I wanted to happen. I didn't want to gain weight. I was so afraid of gaining weight that I did some pretty grim. But while I was on NG feeds, what was it like? It felt violated. Like you can't eat anything properly because you're with eating syndrome. So you have to have everything through the NG tube, and you can't feel it, but in the back of your throat when you have an NG tube, you can see it when you open your mouth. And basically it rubs against the back of your throat and it's so painful. Anyway, the point of me making this video wasn't to tell my story. I wanted to make this video to say that having an NG tube doesn't make you any more worthy of support than if you don't have an NG tube. I still have an eating disorder now and I don't have an NG tube, but that doesn't make it any less valid. It's still a struggle, it's still a diagnosis, and I still get help with this diagnosis. You do not need an NG tube to be valid. If you're underweight or overweight, you can be overweight and have an eating disorder, but specifically if you're underweight and you are aiming to hit a certain BMI so you get an NG tube, so you feel valid, you are just as worthy of support now as you would be if you had an NG tube. NG tube doesn't equal treatment. I had an NG tube and it didn't make me recover. It took me years of fighting this mental illness, and eating disorders are a mental illness. It took me years to finally build up to a point where I could eat again. And like my last video, teaching you to eat again, is a video I made because learning to eat after anorexia is so hard. My current diagnosis is eating disorder not otherwise specified, also known as OSFED. I don't know what OSFED actually stands for, so I can't give you that. I'll put it on screen here. Another little story, not relevant to NG tubes, but I was getting given potassium A&E because while I was on the ward, my potassium level dropped and they said you need to stay A&E because it was too low to treat on the ward. And they put the IV in. I was fine for like an hour. Then I started to panic because I was starting to bloat from the water. So I pulled out the IV. However, I do now know how to take out an IV. I've learned. I've watched loads of training videos on it and I have done it in the past and it just doesn't bleed anymore. So, little skill that I've learned. I don't advise learning to take out how to take out your own IV. But I did. But yeah, you don't need an NG tube to be valid. Thank you for watching. If you're new, subscribe. And I'll see you in my next video in a few days. Bye guys.